He compressed space itself to create a black hole, and wiped an entire army of dragons off the face of the earth. He resurrected the dead like some kind of god, and turned the immortal vampire queen into his personal pet. But to the rest of the world, he was nothing but trash. Labeled a defective mage, he was humiliated and banished from his own country, all because his magic was supposedly only good for making invisible walls. What those arrogant idiots didn't realize is that his power literally bends the laws of physics. He can deflect any max-level spell, and slice through S-rank monsters like butter. Trained by the legendary Witch of the Underworld, his soul carries more weight than any living legend. And now, the same kingdom that tossed him aside like garbage is about to find out what happens when you piss off the barrier master. Treating the MC like a total nobody, Ochi straight up calls him defective because of his useless magic. Without even looking him in the eye, he just tells the kid to get lost and leave the party for good. This catches him completely off guard since they literally just cleared a dungeon and now he's getting kicked out of nowhere. He's left in absolute shock trying to wrap his head around this crazy situation. Then the leader asks if he's deaf, making it crystal clear that this dead weight needs to pack his bags. Still completely lost, the kid stutters, trying to figure out the real reason he's being kicked out. Ochi gives it to him straight, saying that tomorrow's dungeon is nightmare tier and he'll only get in the way. He asks if he knows why, before dropping his ridiculously long and pompous title. Turns out the guy isn't just a crown prince, but he also carries the title of hero. But since the Demon King is already dead, that heroic class has basically just become a fancy decoration. We then cut over to the kingdom of Gaitaniga. There, the king forces Ochi to conquer dungeons for the sole purpose of inflating the future successor's ego, reminding the MC that, as a court mage, his main job was basically to babysit the prince. The only problem is that Ochi absolutely despises him, constantly calling him a defective mage. He takes a moment to reflect on that affectionate little nickname, explaining that the only spell he can actually cast is his so-called barrier magic. That is, until a teammate chimes in, saying that everyone has gotten way too strong to even need a shield anymore, and the prince is quick to brag, asking if he noticed how the monsters were dropping in just one hit. He keeps the humiliation train rolling, asking if a single enemy even managed to lay a finger on him. Frustrated, the kid clenches his fists and admits that they didn't. Then Ochi starts acting like the ultimate swordmaster, claiming that barriers are actually an insult to his talent. Trying to explain himself, the MC admits it might look useless, but he immediately gets yelled at, with the hero insisting that he's nothing more than a one-trick pony. He agrees, but tries to make it clear that his barriers are just your average shields. But Ochi screams that he doesn't want to hear any excuses, leaving the kid completely cornered. Breaking into a cold sweat, he tries to speak up again, even though he knows it'll just sound like cheap talk. He points out that monsters never even get near their camp thanks to his protection. He reveals that he's been casting invisible barriers on them this whole time, but the group just treats it like a joke. Then, they ask if it isn't just that basic mana bubble, and the MC admits that it is, but he insists that his magic can be used for a ton of things, and that he worked his tail off to support the team. But another teammate just mocks him, saying he never felt this so-called help, leaving him completely crushed. Then the prince decides to refresh his memory, reminding him that he was nothing but a slightly talented commoner, and that even though he graduated with perfect grades and became the youngest genius in the court, at the end of the day, Ochi looks at him with pure disgust and says he was nothing but a massive disappointment. He tries to argue that he only used the barriers to protect them before things went south. Getting annoyed, the prince demands to know if he was using real magic or just putting on a show, yelling that all he did was throw up a bunch of walls that literally nobody asked for. This leaves the MC totally confused, stuttering as he tries to figure out what they're getting at. That is, until Ochi yells that nobody in the party can even see these so-called barriers. The problem is, his magic is completely invisible to anyone with zero affinity for it, which means all of them. He gets accused of making up these barrier arts just so he wouldn't lose his sweet spot on the team, with a teammate chiming in that, honestly, he was just trying to pull a fast one on him. Looking down, our protagonist admits that there's actually a bit of truth to that accusation, confessing that his main reason for staying with the party is basically the money. He explains that he chose the royal service for the stability and the fat paycheck that comes with it. Ochi immediately mocks him, calling it embarrassing that he expects to get paid without lifting a finger. Hearing that, the kid clenches his fist and says he actually needs the money to help his family. But the prince shuts that down real quick, reminding him that he's just an orphan with nobody. Looking him dead in the eye, he confirms that yeah, he doesn't have parents, but he was raised in a rundown orphanage right outside the capital. He tries to explain that he needed the cash to keep the orphanage starts running, but he sees they don't care and tries pleading with them. Except the other 3 members simply turn their backs, completely ignoring the poor guy, leaving him stunned by the absolute disrespect coming from his own team. One of them points a finger, saying that scamming the government with fake magic is as low as it gets. Another chimes in, saying he only became a court mage through bribery or some shady connections. And the last one adds that a mage who only casts barriers is suspicious to say the least. Completely crushed, the kid just stands there with the look of someone who's lost everything. That's when Ochi flashes a real villainous smirk, deciding that simply kicking him out isn't enough. Pointing right at him, the prince shouts at the top of his lungs, announcing that he's officially banished from the entire country. Panic immediately sets in, as he can't wrap his head around how getting fired turned into being exiled. Because as far as the prince is concerned, he stole taxpayer money, and liars have no place in his nation. He gives the kid a generous 10-day deadline to pack up and just drop off the face of the earth. And to top it off, he plays the good guy by warning him that if he stays past the deadline, he's a dead man. He tells him to grab his trash and get lost, while the rest of the party just walks away laughing. He's left standing there trying to process this absolute nightmare of a situation, all while a heavy rain starts pouring down just to make things worse, leaving him muttering in disbelief. He still wants to believe that this whole exile thing is just some sick joke, but that's when it finally hits him, and the real despair starts kicking in. He remembers the orphanage, realizing that if he gets kicked out of the country, he'll never see his family again. We get a quick flashback showing a little girl smiling right at him, and just the thought of never seeing that smile again makes his stomach draw. He refuses to accept this fate, deciding he needs to clear up this misunderstanding once and for all. So he comes up with what seems like a brilliant idea. He's gonna take his case straight to the king. He figures that if the king just talks some sense into the prince, everything will go back to normal. But our plan completely goes out the window when a massive dragon suddenly drops from the sky, ready to attack. With no time to sit around and cry, the MC instantly gets ready to unleash his magic. He summons a hexagonal barrier, completely blocking the beast's strike without breaking a sweat. The monster slams right into the shield, shattering its teeth in the process. He actually apologizes to the dragon, letting it know he's in a bit of a rush today. He follows up with a heavy-hitting variation of his spell, the famous barrier form. Using attack pattern number 5, he shapes spears that completely impale the dragon in an instant. The beast feels the sheer force of the impact, its eyes literally trembling from the hit. But even while badly wounded, the giant lizard is stubborn and tries to go for one last bite. Realizing this thing is tougher than it looks, he preps his barrier form attack pattern number 2. He conjures hundreds of energy blades that instantly shred the creature to pieces. Mincing the beast's claws, he realizes that as long as he focuses, his magic can do absolutely anything he wants. With a simple wave of his hand, he proves that he has complete control over the energy particles around him. He finally realizes that his powers aren't just for putting up a couple of tiny walls. As the dragon hits the ground, he realizes his magic is actually a brutal offensive weapon as well. He explains that there are different barrier patterns for basically everything: attack, defense, and support. The only problem is that the noise just attracted an entire swarm of dragons heading straight for him, leaving our hero totally surrounded by a pack of starving flying lizards. He complains about his rotten luck, but decides that if he's going to be called defective, he might as well be the absolute best at it. Since barriers are the only thing he knows how to do, he's deciding to take them straight to the max level. Glowing in a bright blue aura, he immediately charges up his ultimate secret technique, and with a loud shout, he unleashes the true raw power of his magic, an ability known simply as the Void. A massive flash of light explodes, wiping the dragons off the face of the earth in the blink of an eye. As the dust settles, the kid is left standing there without a scratch under a perfectly sunny sky. He looks out at the horizon with a completely calm expression, ready to take on whatever comes next. Cutting over to the capital of Gayata, Niga, about 90 miles away. And then we're right back to that peaceful little rural village where the kid grew up. It's called Myoku, and we see him just strolling through it without a care in the world. He's walking with this serious look on his face, completely lost in his own thoughts. But he's so distracted that he ends up bumping hard into some guy. The guy immediately throws a fit, asking if he even watches where he's going. He gets furious because the kid doesn't even react, and just keeps screaming in his ear. That is, until a woman steps up asking what all this nonsense is about, and the guy calls her Flare. And Flare shoots the guy this absolute death glare that could cut through steel. She walks right up to him with a stance that screams she is definitely not messing around. She demands to know what happened, and the guy complains about getting bumped into without an apology. She agrees he should have apologized, but completely rips into the guy for screaming at someone who's clearly already having a rough day. Our boy is just standing off to the side, watching this whole drama unfold in total silence. Pretty soon, the man apologizes to Fleur, but she tells him to settle it with the kid instead. Then she turns to our protagonist, letting him know that that he needs to apologize too. He just looks at her, still trying to process what the heck was even happening. He stutters out a super awkward apology just to put an end to the whole thing. With that, the guy storms off right after, leaving the street peaceful once again. That's when the girl smiles and points out that it's been a whole year since they last saw each other. Giving her the shy little smile, he agrees that time really did fly by. He nods, still feeling a bit out of place, admitting it really has been a while. He gets this super tight hug from Flare, who tells him she missed him so much. But she quickly notices his defeated look and asks what went wrong. This partner's full name being Fleur Sorel. She's the daughter of the orphanage director and our hero's lifelong adventuring partner. They grew up completely inseparable from their school days all the way until he became a big shot court mage. He reflects on how, no matter how bad things got, she was always his true safe haven. So, after listening to all the drama, the blonde says she completely understands the situation. He tells her he got blocked by the guards and only came to say his goodbyes before fleeing the country. She listens to everything with this attentive look, totally feeling his pain, and she straight up tells him she's coming with him, which makes him think she's just talking about sending letters. He completely freezes, asking if he just heard that crazy idea right. She confirms she's running away with him and hits him with a loud and clear "because I love you" right to his face. This leaves the kid stuttering in shock, while she promises she's not letting him go alone. She asks what's wrong, and he admits his brain literally just blue-screened. She smiles, explaining that her feelings are genuine because she's always admired how hard he works. She holds his hands with all the care and affection in the world. Dying of embarrassment, he tells her she doesn't need to throw her whole life away just for him. That's when Flare drops the news that the guild has been begging her dad to take over as leader. She casually mentions the old man even got remarried, and our protagonist almost falls over because he had absolutely no clue. She explains her dad was probably just too embarrassed to announce it to the village folks, prompting him to point out that her new stepmom is a total workaholic. And the girl reveals that, thanks to that, the orphanage is actually loaded now and doesn't even need his help anymore. He processes this massive info dump and lets out a pretty discouraged "I see," but she comforts him, saying he's worked hard enough and now it's his turn to be happy. He repeats that phrase under his breath, trying to grasp what it actually means to live the way he wants to. Then the blonde squeezes his hand and nervously asks if he hates her. Caught completely off guard, he answers quietly that he actually likes her a lot. She breaks into this massive relieved smile, saying they should stay together forever, with the kid confessing that he was actually planning to tell her how he felt the next time they met anyway. He lets it all out, saying this ungrateful kingdom can go straight to hell. Flashing this genuine huge smile, he agrees that his partner is completely right. Thinking about his newlywed future father-in-law and the blonde's undeniable invitation to run away together, and since his exile was a done deal anyway, he decided to ditch the kingdom in very good company. Jumping the scene back to the capital, someone is throwing an absolutely massive tantrum. It's the king himself, completely consumed by rage, ordering them to fetch his idiot son immediately. Shouting from his throne, he orders that the genius who fired our protagonist be sent to break rocks in the mines. The advisor hesitates and almost gets his own head on the chopping block for thinking the king is overreacting. But the ruler shuts that down right away. That kid is an absolute top-tier genius, showing he knows exactly what's up. He asks if the guy noticed the barrier around the capital. The advisor confirms he did, only to find out that our protagonist created the whole thing completely on his own. He stammers out that it's impossible, until he remembers the monster horde that vanished out of nowhere. The king lays down the law, saying that for him, becoming a literal weapon of mass destruction is a walk in the park. He continues his rant, explaining that the kid's barrier actually hides some seriously insane magic. He says it's the kind of power that breaks the rules of the entire world and leaves everyone completely speechless. He explains he's tight with the academy's director, who never stopped hyping our protagonist up. With a look of pure disgust, he laments that his own son banished the country's greatest trump card. That is, until the little prince walks in, strutting like he's the master strategist of the entire kingdom, and the king just sighs, knowing his party is probably hot garbage right now, and the realization is gonna hit him real soon. He walks into the room all full of himself, bragging about kicking the criminal out of the country, proudly announcing that he freed the people from a freeloader who was just sucking up their tax money. Trembling with pure hatred, the king explodes and straight up calls his son a moron in front of everyone, and the idiot has no idea why he's getting yelled at, asking where exactly he messed up, with his father screaming, asking if he has any idea the colossal mistake he just made, and the heir still tries to talk back, back, questioning if his decision was really that bad. He screams that letting go of the strongest mage in the world is going to have some incredibly heavy consequences. Back at the village, Flare wants to see her dad to get that nerve-wracking marriage proposal over with. Our boy is feeling insecure, asking if she's really sure she wants to leave her whole life behind. In return, he gets this incredibly warm, breathtakingly tight hug. She tells him it's already a done deal, even though our hero still has one foot out the door. She doubles down, saying this is her path now, making the kid almost cry from pure emotion. Mind made up, she drags him over to see his future father-in-law, telling him to man up and just spit it out. The scene shifts to the orphanage under a full moon, setting up this heavy farewell vibe. They walk into the place, with the blonde already shouting for her dad at the top of her lungs, causing this absolute mountain of a man to turn around, surprised by the unexpected visit. The old man, Darian, recognizes the kid right away and calmly asks how things are going in the capital. He tries to answer, but the blonde interrupts entirely and drops the marriage bomb right then and there, leaving him in an absolute state of panic over her blunt, straightforward approach. And while the poor guy is practically having a meltdown, her dad doesn't even blink in surprise. He says with the utmost calm that no one would take better care of his daughter than this kid, earning this massive, victorious smile on Flare's face the second she hears her dad's blessing. Darian casually adds that he saw it coming, since she wouldn't shut up about him anyway. Dying of embarrassment, she kicks the old man right in the shin, nearly folding him in half from the pain. She tells him to shut up, while the poor guy is left standing there rubbing his bruised leg. Once he recovers, the old man changes the subject and asks where the lovebirds are planning to live. Completely awkward, the kid explains that he was actually kicked out of the kingdom for good. The blonde fills in the details, and her dad says he totally expected this kind of nonsense from that fool, revealing out of nowhere that he was actually the former master of the prince himself. The two of them scream in shock when they find out the old man used to be an S-rank adventurer. He complains that this is the first time he's hearing about this, and that his future father-in-law really loves keeping secrets. He explains he got the gig from the king but got fired on the spot because of the prince's tantrum, calling the heir a fool, which makes our hero wonder if they're being a little too harsh. But he quickly changes the subject, saying the destination doesn't even matter as long as Flare is happy. That's when the old man says he's got one last surprise and steps away for a second, heading over to a little room nearby and opening the door. He comes back with a little pouch as a wedding gift, insisting that the two of them take it. He tries to politely refuse, but his future father-in-law puts his foot down, saying the money was already his daughter's anyway, telling them they don't need his allowance anymore, which hits the kid all emotional. As the blonde accepts it, her dad asks him to take good care of her and regrets that his wife isn't there to see it, revealing once and for all that this stepmom is straight up a badass S-rank adventurer, explaining that the whole area has been swarming with vampires and their goons lately, making the kid tense up since he remembers the reputation of those bloodsuckers all too well. And the old man just adds fuel to the fire, dropping the rumor that the Queen of the Night is back. He recalls the legends of this villain, a monster so ridiculously overpowered that she had to be sealed away back in the day, putting two and two together right then and there, realizing they're dealing with something way out of their league this time. He thinks it looks pretty bad, but his father-in-law quickly calms him down, saying it's probably just a silly rumor. He holds on to the money, while his partner confidently guarantees that they can handle it. Flashing a huge smile, she brags about having the best barrier master right by her side. He looks at his amazing partner with all the confidence in the world, squeezing her hand and swearing that nobody is gonna lay a finger on her during this journey. With his eyes shining, he vows to completely pulverize anyone who dares to get in their way, making the father-in-law think that, with all that power, the two of them are safe from absolutely anything, declaring with pure conviction that, when it comes to defense, he is simply unbeatable. At that, the girl's dad smiles and says he's handing over his greatest treasure to him. A little while later, the blonde comes back loaded with bags and apologizes for keeping him waiting. He looks at the mountain of junk, complaining about how the heck they're supposed to carry all that on their backs. But she asks him to use his old trick, and the kid immediately starts casting. He activates pattern number 5, a super useful support skill, making all the luggage vanish in a flash of light, going straight into a magical inventory, leaving the father-in-law completely amazed by the super versatile magic, full of hidden tricks, explaining that, on top of the basics, every type of magic he uses has its own secret arts. Fully confident that no one can mess with him, she announces it's time to hit the road. But right before crossing the gate, the kid pulls the old man aside for one last word, and the veteran adventurer looks at him with this little smile of a mission accomplished. He gives him a respectful bow to say thanks, with the old man wishing them a safe trip. Walking through the night under the moonlight, he asks what their next destination is, with the blonde suggesting the Madoka's empire, where a person's talent matters more than their bloodline. Smiling and agreeing with the idea, but that peaceful vibe completely changes in the blink of an eye. His eyes turn super sharp as he senses a sinister presence creeping closer. He calls out to his partner, telling her to get inside the barrier as fast as possible. Completely confused, she tries to ask why, but the kid tells her to just do it without a peep. He activates a spell and traps the blonde inside an energy cube, scaring the absolute life out of her. He yells right after to warn her that the enemy just popped up right in their area, as the barrier takes a ridiculous hit, with her stuck inside still having no idea what's going on. Meanwhile, on the outside, our hero gets into a combat stance totally ready to throw down, and with the girl safely tucked away, this incredibly creepy laugh starts echoing through the entire forest. A vampire emerges from the shadows, greeting the two of them with this twisted smile. The kid instantly recognizes her as Nosferatu herself, the infamous queen of the night. She tells them they smell amazing and that they should be honored to become her next snack. But cutting the small talk short, he locks onto the diva and immediately preps attack barrier number 1. He fires off the Star Strike, blasting a heavy wave of energy right into her face, making the villain eat dirt, completely shocked that a human actually managed to land a hit on her. Without even flinching, he warns the undead chick not to ruin the start of his brand new life. Furious, she tells him to tone it down, but the kid says she just messed with the wrong guy. He introduces himself as the absolute wall mage and tells her he'll be acting as her executioner today. Baring her fangs in a bizarre smile, the vampire locks her eyes straight on the blonde, prompting our protagonist to tell his partner to stay put, swearing he'll protect her from everything. Super confident, the girl agrees right away and tells him to go ahead and beat the living daylights out of the monarch. He takes his fighting stance, keeping the girl completely secure inside that energy cube. The vampire just mocks his magic, thinking his little trick is nothing but a cheap parlor stunt. She unleashes a wave of powers so sinister it makes the entire forest shake to its core, causing all the plants around her to wither and rot away in the blink of an eye, this being her legendary, incredibly broken energy drain attack. She brags that she's going to suck every last drop of life out of anyone standing nearby, but the kid just stands there totally chill, dropping a simple "got it," which absolutely pisses the villain off. Completely losing her mind, she screams that her attack could drain a giant dragon dry in 2 seconds flat, with him explaining the obvious as calmly as possible. All he had to do was put up a barrier, and that's it, making the woman absolutely lose it, screaming that a shield can't block a soul drain. She keeps insisting that defensive magic only stops physical hits, not energy theft. Then our hero schools her. His barrier blocks literally anything that tries to cause harm, leaving the monarch with her jaw on the floor, saying she's never seen anything so overpowered in her life. He just shrugs and tells her to take good notes before she turns to dust for good, already pulling up a crazy new spell in midair using just his fingertips, with a bunch of glowing magical symbols surrounding him as he casts. At this, the vampire clicks her tongue, instantly realizing things just got seriously real, focusing all her energy to fire off a counterattack meant to end it all. Driven by desperation, she unfurls these giant wings and charges at him like a maniac, with the kid recognizing the technique right off the bat, the infamous blood wings. She confirms she's a master of the crimson blood arts, having absolute control over the whole thing. She tells the kid to go straight to hell and fires an attack with every ounce of fury she's got. It's her blood ray, this completely absurd red laser that just obliterates everything in its path. But the blast explodes right against the kid's shield, and he doesn't even take a single step back. He stays totally chill inside, without a single drop of sweat rolling down his face, with the monarch screaming like a lunatic, demanding that the barrier just shatter already. Except he's already shifted his barrier form into defense pattern number 3. He finishes the incantation and triggers the special rebound function on that magic wall, making the laser hit and bounce back instantly, flying right back at her twice as fast, leaving the vampire totally frozen, unable to believe her own spell just got turned against her. She takes her own blast head on and lets out this incredibly bizarre scream of pain. She gets blown away by the impact, smashing right through a bunch of trees along the way. Completely wrecked on the ground, she grumbles that a human should never be able to pull that off, spiraling into pure panic, trying to figure out what kind of hack this kid is using, and he explains with the patience of a saint that he just used a reflector shield, simple as that, humiliating her even further by adding he made the wall elastic just to bounce the shot right back, leaving the villain utterly speechless, completely outraged by how creative he is on defense. He watches her regenerate, remembering that fighting the undead is always this same boring drag. She shoots shoots him that twisted smile to provoke him, thinking the kid is already running out of steam. Complaining about struggling against a mere human, she demands to know who he really is. He answers mockingly that he's just a defective mage, totally useless for anything else, making the monarch scream with pure hatred, telling him to cut the crap and stop lying. Freaking out, the vampire screams that she has noble blood and absolutely refuses to be humiliated by a mortal. Without even blinking, our protagonist just stands there watching her throw this massive tantrum. That's when she resorts to her blood doping skill, giving herself a massive upgrade in power, turning into an absolute blur. She charges so fast that even our boy struggles to keep track of her. Landing a solid hit, she forces the kid to step back, grumbling because he actually felt that impact. Flashing a huge smile, the villain asks if he can still cast his barriers at point-blank range. In the blink of an eye, she grabs him, totally ready to deliver the final blow, but he just looks deep into her eyes, without showing even a single ounce of fear. She activates her secret draining art, and these dark tentacles sprout right out of her back. Laughing like a maniac, the beast warns him she's gonna suck his life dry and turn him into a literal raisin. But to her absolute despair, the kid calmly replies that he's still very much alive, leaving the vampire with her jaw completely on the floor in pure shock. She screams, unable to understand this miracle, so he tells her to look a little closer at his body, revealing this faint blue aura that starts glowing right around him. He explains he used barrier pattern number 5, basically creating an invisible armor right over his skin. Completely dumbfounded, the villain actually starts doubting if our protagonist is even human at this point. Spreading her wings, she decides that running away is definitely her best strategy right now. She drops that classic villain line, saying he won't get away so easily next time. Except, when she tries to take off, she slams face first into an invisible wall and nearly breaks her nose. That's when the kid reveals barrier number 6, prison, and lets her know there isn't going to be a next time. Ready to wrap this up, a giant cage of light appears out of nowhere, trapping the queen inside. Cursing up a storm, she hears our hero say he's going to seal her away, which completely terrifies her. He explains that since she's immortal, he has to resort to some pretty drastic measures. Was all the calm in the world, the kid announces he's going to seal her very existence. Focusing his energy with his eyes glowing, he prepares to deliver the final blow. That's when it finally hits her, realizing he belongs to the legendary lineage of barrier masters. Muttering in pure terror, she realizes he's the natural enemy of her entire race. Desperate inside the cage, she screams that she absolutely refuses to go back into a seal. She lets out one last blood-curdling scream straight out of a horror movie. With one final hand sign, our protagonist casts the seal, and a blinding flash completely swallows up the villain's screams. As the light fades, all that's left is a metal crucifix lying on the ground. The seal was a complete success. Watching from the outside, Flair finally lets out a breath of pure relief. She runs right into his arms, absolutely thrilled that the kid just took down a legendary vampire. Flashing a smile, our protagonist feels like it's mission accomplished, but out of nowhere, he gets this sudden flashback of Flair being called the Chosen One. In the memory, a young Rikucho asks what that means, and they tell him she's basically a magnet for trouble, with a mysterious woman explaining that every monster in the world is going to be hunting her down. Standing with her back turned, his master gives him one strict order: he must protect Fleur from everything, no matter what. Little Rikuto actually asks his master for help, but she just hits him with a cold hard no. She tells him she's got better things to do than play babysitter, calling the kid out by name. She orders him to protect Fleur for the rest of his life, which the kid thought was a total drag at the time. Snapping back to the present, the memory fades out with her voice echoing, telling him to lay his life on the line for her. He's brought completely back to reality by Flair's voice, praising Rick as the most incredible guy in the world. She hugs him tight, assuring him that the world is finally going to recognize what he's really worth. She promises to stay by his side forever as the Barrier Master's absolute #1 fan. Smiling warmly, our protagonist is genuinely touched by all her support. With a full heart, he just tells her how grateful he is to have her around. But duty calls, and he tells her he needs to go check on something weird, leaving her totally confused. She agrees, watching him take off at top speed and disappear straight into the darkness. Left behind, she immediately realizes that life with him is never going to be peaceful and quiet. A little while later, the kid heads right back to the spot where the fight went down. He crouches down and picks up the metal crucifix that was just left lying on the ground. Holding the thing up, he taunts her, asking if the little bat can hear him in there. And he actually gets this super muffled, grumpy little groan right from inside the metal. surprising our hero, who honestly didn't expect this magic intercom to work so well. Out of nowhere, the villain's voice turns into this desperate screaming, completely refusing to accept her defeat. Completely losing it, she screams that there's no way she could lose to some low-class human. Annoyed, the kid tells her to just shut her trap for a single second. Suddenly, the crucifix in his hand starts glowing so bright it looks like it's going to explode, causing a star-shaped mark to appear right on his chest, reacting to the intense light. And then, boom, a massive blast of blue energy takes over absolutely everything. When the dust finally settles, there's a white-haired girl dressed in a maid outfit sitting on the ground, with the metal crucifix now hanging around her neck, looking exactly like a pet collar. She looks around completely lost and starts yelling, but he quickly warns her that this freedom is conditional. He explains he only loosened the leash enough to give her a physical body, leaving her super confused. He reveals that her actual powers are still completely locked away, making the vampire curse his magic out. Ignoring her tantrum, he tells her he only let her out to get some answers, ordering her to start talking. Pouting, she claims she doesn't answer to humans, but he just casually drops the word bind. Instantly, the girl lets out a scream of pain so loud you could hear it from miles away, with the crucifix dropping right back onto the ground in the middle of her meltdown. Then, he threatens to leave her locked in the dark forever, and toss the collar straight into the bottom of the ocean. Desperate, her voice begs from inside the metal, swearing up and down that she hates tight spaces. With a simple snap of his fingers, the kid finally ends her punishment. Gasping for air on the ground, she grumbles that she's never been so humiliated in her entire life. She tries to complain again, but the annoying vamp gets hit with another bind and goes right back to screaming. Completely tamed now, she asks what he wants, and our protagonist straight up demands her real name. Realizing she's got no way out, the poor girl hands over her ID, Carmilla Vlad Tepesh. He introduces himself as Rakuto, and she immediately asks if he isn't ashamed of beating up a child. He just laughs, reminding her that she's literally an ancient monster, and asks about this so-called noble blood clan. Hearing that they're the absolute elite, he quickly realizes there are probably more annoying pests like her out in the world, with Carmilla confirming his suspicion with a very smug, exactly. Taunting her, he calls her weak, but the vampire completely loses it and calls him a freak of nature. She screams that sealing someone entirely on your own is insane, since it usually takes an entire army of mages. Calmly, our boy calls her rude and swears up and down that he's just a normal human. Crying on the floor, the villain insists he isn't human, but he just hits back by calling her weak again. Ignoring all her drama, he asks about her clan, and she reveals that the other seals are about to break too. Finding this pretty interesting, our protagonist wants to know why she managed to wake up first. She reveals she drank the blood of a barrier master in the past, stealing their powers to break herself free. That actually catches him off guard, and she admits she knows how to use barriers, but compared to him, she's a total amateur. His expression turning dead serious, he gears up for the question that actually matters. He demands to know the names and powers of all her little friends who are still locked away. She tries to act all cool and evil, but the sweat pouring down her forehead completely gives away how nervous she is. She says she roughly knows what they can do since they're in her crew, but asks what exactly he's plotting. Pointing a finger right in her face, the kid calls her by her actual name, Carmilla. He lays out his offer. She becomes his servant, sells out her clan, and in return, she gets a tiny shred of freedom. Laughing at the idea, she totally refuses, but he quickly ruins her fun by hitting her with the crucifix punishment again, cranking the pain back up just so she can really feel the weight of this new management. With the object glowing with that intense blue energy, screaming, "I'm the one in charge here." Holding the seal tight, the kid gets totally ready to wrap up these negotiations for good, warning her in the most direct way possible that wasn't a request and her contract has already been signed. Screaming from deep inside the seal, she calls our protagonist a monster and a demon. Flashing this little smirk, he shoots back that coming from a vampire, that's actually a huge compliment. The Carmilla, still locked away, demands to know why on earth he even needs her. That's when the kid explains he might bump into other nobles, so he wants a living manual on standby. Seeing her play hard to get, he threatens to just leave her stuck in the void, and the vampire immediately apologizes. He tells her to keep her voice down so Flair doesn't get suspicious, and sets up a telepathic link right away. Quickly shifting his attention back to Fleur, the girl comes over looking super worried, asking if he's okay. He gives her a gentle head pat just to calm her nerves a bit. He guarantees her everything is totally under control, which finally lets her breathe a sigh of relief. Taking advantage of the moment, she goes right in for a super tight hug, catching our boy a little off guard with all this sudden affection. From inside the crucifix, Carmilla catches Flair's scent and whispers something about a secret art. Cutting the mood, he announces it's time to hit the road and readies his seriously overpowered technique. Out of nowhere, an entire carriage just pops up right in the middle of the road, and he tells Fleur to hop in. When Carmilla starts screaming again, he loses his patience and tells the vampire to shut it. Freaking out over the vehicle appearing out of thin air, she calls it impossible, but he casually says he just rearranged some atoms, explaining in detail that he shrunk his barriers to build whatever he wants, completely mocking the situation. But the vampire yells that there is absolutely nothing simple about that and calls him a total freak. Pulling the carriage away from the spot, the journey kicks off with the vampire in tow and a whole lot of mystery ahead, showing that the party now officially has a legendary creature acting as a glorified intern. Since everything is guided strictly by the protagonist's mind, they don't even need a driver, and the trip goes super smoothly. Glancing over, he notices that Flair adopted a black cat and has gotten completely attached to it. Looking absolutely radiant, she coddles the little furball, which is now wearing Carmilla's crucifix on its collar. But the cat looks like it's living through an absolute nightmare, straight up sweating bullets over the whole situation, all because that feline is actually the queen of the night herself, wearing a disguise. Since she wouldn't stop complaining about being stuck in a metal prison, our protagonist had to improvise. He whipped up a fake barrier body shaped exactly like a cat for the vampire to inhabit. At that moment, the crucifix on the collar gives off a little glow. Curious, Flair asks where he got it, and he lies right to her face, saying he just found it in the forest. Being the absolute softie she is, the girl immediately decides the little guy is part of the family. Getting absolutely smothered with affection, the disguised vampire makes a face of pure disgust. Watching this whole scene unfold from the front row, our protagonist lets out a frustrated grumble through his teeth, admitting to himself that he's actually dying of jealousy over this little furball. Staring right back at him, the cat gives him this mocking look, totally loving the advantage she has right now. The kid quickly gets serious, warning the vampire that playtime is over because there's trouble up ahead. Wanting to know what's up, she hears that he's stepping out, and obviously, she's going with him. Jumping out of the carriage while it's still moving, the two of them land in total superhero style. As soon as their boots hit the forest floor, they run right into two heavily wounded knights laid out on the ground. One of them is groaning in pain, complaining that his body took some serious damage, leaving Flair completely horrified at the sight of all these beaten up people. Right then, a soldier screams out in desperation, begging for absolutely any healing potion they have left, while another, sporting a totally cracked helmet, orders them to use every last drop of medicine they've got. Quietly analyzing the scene, our protagonist tries to process the sheer scale of the damage. He turns to his partner and gives her a heads up that this detour is going to take a while. Completely determined, she says she doesn't care at all and wants to jump right in and help. Scanning every little detail around him, he tries to figure out exactly what kind of enemy could have done this. Walking up to a fallen female knight, he asks if anyone is still in one piece, totally surprising the woman. Introducing himself simply as a traveler, our protagonist offers up his healing skills to help the squad out. Sighing in absolute relief, she thanks her savior and points right over to the most critically injured ones. Turning to look where she pointed, his expression immediately darkens, knowing he's going to have to pull out the big guns. But then he quickly notices that the knight right in front of him is in way worse shape than she looks. Seeing that she's completely missing her left arm, he asks what kind of disaster could have possibly caused that. Stuttering, she explains that some giant beast tore through them, leaving our protagonist pretty intrigued. She tells him about their hunt for a beast that completely turned the tables on them and ended up ripping her arm clean off. Meanwhile, right in Flair's lap, the cat Carmilla starts shaking like a leaf. Noticing how nervous she is, the girl asks why she started trembling so badly out of nowhere. Turns out the vampire is completely panicking because she recognizes that exact group of knights all too well. Ignoring the pet entirely, our boy tells the knight he's going to fix her up first. Thanking him, she says you can't exactly grow a missing arm back, but the kid confidently claims otherwise, leaving the woman totally confused as he points his hand straight at the massive wound. He activates his barrier morphosis into support pattern number 2, heavily focused on regeneration. Glowing particles of light start rebuilding the limb right before her eyes, almost making her pass out from the shock. Testing out her brand new arm, she calls it an absolute miracle and immediately wants to go hunt down these fangs. He tries to play it cool, but that weird weird talk about fangs definitely leaves a bad taste in his mouth, making Carmilla shrink down in absolute terror, totally convinced that she's the target of this whole conversation. Shouting to the rest of the troops, the captain announces they've all been saved by an elite healer. He tries to explain that his class has absolutely nothing to do with healing, but nobody is even listening, completely ignoring his protests. She begs him to save the rest of the SWAT who are hanging on by a thread. Having zero patience to heal them one by one, he activates his area of effect mode, covering the entire clearing. He fires off this ridiculous mass heal that just swallows up the entire group in an instant. Watching their wounds vanish like literal magic, the warriors are left completely dumbfounded. Patting themselves down without finding a single scar, they have absolutely no idea what kind of hack they just witnessed. The celebration immediately explodes with joy as they try to wrap their heads around whatever sorcery that was. Pretty soon, the whole group declares him an actual deity and starts praying to the god of healing. Cutting the chatter, he clarifies once again that he's a barrier mage, confusing the captain even more. Asking how the heck building a wall has anything at all to do with healing dying people. He drops this nerdy lecture about oxygen manipulation within barriers, while the woman just nods and pretends to get it. Even though the explanation completely flew over her head, she thanks the great master from the bottom of her heart. Getting straight to the point, he demands to know exactly what kind of monster beat them up this badly. She explains that their target is the terrifying Queen of the Night, which completely catches our hero off guard, with the kid instantly remembering the vampire flashing that crazy classic villain smile. But Fleur, being the sharp one she is, connects the dots and points out that's Carmilla's exact name, making the cat on her lap cringe like she just bit into a lemon, absolutely dying of embarrassment, evaluating the beast's strength, while the cat grumbles in her head that the protagonist is the one who's completely broken. But he calms the captain down, hitting her with the truth that the queen has already been safely sealed away, leaving the woman completely in shock, asking if he's being serious or just messing with her, with him confirming it as calmly as possible. She figures the fight must have been a breeze and immediately asks for his name. Feeling a bit awkward about all the attention, he formally introduces himself as Rikuto Guardman. Returning the gesture with a salute, she introduces herself as Siraj, the leader of the Fang Hunters. He repeats the title, looking like he finds the group's name extremely specific. At that, Carmilla tenses up, knowing full well this squad exists purely to turn vampires into mincemeat. Stepping right up to Rikuto, Siraj throws out a line, saying she has a massive favor to ask him, giving the kid a seriously bad feeling while she practically begs him to lead their team. He shoots her down with a hard no, leaving the woman frozen before she claims he could save the entire world. But our boy stays locked and acting as seeping the world sounds like a total drag, wanting to just focus on his piece and flare right there. He exchanges a sweet smile with his partner, thinking that playing the hero is just way too crazy for him. Refusing to take no for an answer, the captain grabs his arm in pure desperation, but the kid doesn't budge, keeping the drama going. She screams that the world desperately needs his help against these monsters. Going into full panic mode, she yells at him to at least hear out what she has to offer. Cutting back to the carriage, Flair asks where they're heading, and he decides they're going to become old-school adventurers. Meanwhile, as the conversation goes on, Flair completely knocks out and falls into a deep sleep, justifying right before she passed out that a guild job at least guaranteed a paycheck and a roof over their heads. But the protagonist explains that the guild doesn't pay a single dime, it's just pure exploitation. Hearing this, the cat Carmilla gives this look like she just felt the absolute weight of poverty. Mocking the whole system, he says hunters practically run on heroism alone and are basically out of their minds. And the kid lays it out straight, saying he desperately needs money to support the girl. And, since his record is completely stained from getting fired at court, no normal job is ever going to hire him. Understanding his logic, the vampire asks if he actually has any experience in this field at all. He confesses he's a total rookie, since he jumped straight out of school and into the royal castle. Highly doubting him, the cat questions how he even survives with such little common sense. Getting annoyed, he throws up this sinister barrier and threatens to literally erase the feline. Cooling off a second later, he assures her he can more than hold his own in both a brawl and with magic. Right then, Fleur wakes up curious and he explains that he actually learned how to fight using his barriers. Cutting the conversation short, a massive roar shakes the ground and completely changes the protagonist's expression. He steps up to the front of the carriage, completely ready to face whoever just interrupted their trip. With all the calm in the world, he announces that a dragon is an absolute golden opportunity. Completely panicking. The two girls have no idea how he can be so chill facing a giant fire lizard. Flashing a smile, he tells him to relax because he's already wiped the floor with plenty of these things. He raises his hand, instantly covering the entire carriage with an indestructible dome of light. Doing the math in his head, our boy knows this beast is going to fetch a massive payout at the market, using his magic to lock the beast's head completely in place, leaving it totally confused, losing all its strength in the blink of an eye. The dragon slams face first right into the ground. He walks back to the carriage looking completely unfazed, like he just swatted away a fly, leaving Carmilla in absolute shock, demanding to know what kind of bizarre spell that was, explaining in the most peaceful tone that he just choked the beast out, leaving the vampire completely speechless, detailing how he trapped its head and just sucked out all the oxygen, showing off some ridiculous control. He confirms that putting up a barrier means controlling the space inside, so messing with the air is the bare minimum. Completely losing it, the cat screams that he just broke literally every single law of physics. Shrugging, he says he doesn't have anyone to compare himself to, so he has no idea if he's actually a genius. Biting her tongue in pure frustration, she realizes the kid doesn't even notice how completely insane he is. She asks why on earth he'd choke the monster out instead of just blowing it to pieces with energy. Thinking strictly about business, he explains that a completely intact carcass sells for way more money, realizing the kid is just a massive cheapskate, while he immediately jumps onto the corpse to appraise it. Standing right in front of it, he gives the command to open up a magical spatial tear. In a bright flash of light, the giant body completely vanishes and he wraps the job up right there. Screaming again, the vampire demands to know where the heck he just stuffed that giant lizard. He explains he tucked it away into a barrier pocket, leaving the cat even more confused. Dropping another lesson, he says his barriers can actually create entirely separate pocket dimensions. Her eyes go wide as she processes the fact that this kid is basically a walking warehouse, wrapping it up by saying this is just his inventory function, which is one of his basic support spells. Hearing that he's completely out of the ordinary, he agrees, saying you really have to get creative. She realizes the protagonist's mind is completely broken, since the impossible is just an everyday routine for him. Then the kid asks if her calling him broken means she thinks he's actually pretty weak. Exploding on the spot, the cat screams that he's ridiculously overpowered and literally humiliated the Queen of the Night. Catching on to the title, the protagonist gets curious and asks if vampires are really all that tough. Taking offense, she explains that her race used to be the absolute greatest terror in the entire world. He dismisses it, saying grandma stories don't win fights, making the vampire growl in pure hatred. Having zero patience for the drama, he just grabs the furball right by the scruff of her neck, announcing that break time is officially over, hauling the super grumpy little cat right back. But Carmilla's eyes lock onto something, warning the kid that they've got some uninvited guests incoming. With dozens of dragons blocking out the sky, the vampire warns him that this is a massive swarm. Planting his feet, he just stands there watching the massive flock close in on them, slamming into the ground and shaking the earth. The beasts completely surround our boy on all sides. Breaking into a smile, he looks at the ambush and starts celebrating, thinking he just hit an absolute goldmine. Trembling with fear, the cat totally panics, asking if he's going to use his broken powers again. Overflowing with pure confidence, the protagonist confirms that's the plan without a second thought, raising his hand to cast his massively overpowered area of effect containment pattern. He unleashes the birdcage, trapping all the dragons inside this giant dome of light, leaving the beasts completely stuck inside, bumping into each other with nowhere to run, turning into an absolute chaos of claws and scales scratching furiously against the glowing walls. Suddenly, a dragon covered in dark mist spits out a blast of pure, sinister energy, making the protagonist realize the danger as it reflects right in his glowing eyes. Feeling the tension spike, the vampire asks what just happened, but he just brushes it off. He comments that there's something really weird in the mix, forcefully trying to break out of the barrier, until the attack finally explodes, completely shattering the wall of light and setting the swarm free, shocking Carmilla. But he explains that when magic is spread too thin, it obviously gets weaker. Still, he gives credit where credit is due, because breaking through his block isn't something just any lizard can pull off. Letting out a macabre roar, the beast is immediately identified by the cat as a corpse dragon, leaving our boy completely lost, having no idea what kind of giant zombie this thing is. She explains it's a noble blood minion created by pumping vampire blood into a dead animal, mourning the loss of a perfectly good carcass. The cat asks if he's going to seal the creature away. Scrapping that plan, the protagonist wants to know if this shadowy thing is also actually immortal. immortal. Hearing from the cat that immortality is strictly for purebloods, and this monster is completely disposable, shooting it a dead cold look. The kid decides this useless beast is just in the way. Gearing up to strike, Carmilla warns him that rotten meat will contaminate the entire area, leaving the vampire super tense, practically drooling from how incredibly nervous she is about the danger. But he tells her he already knows, which is exactly why he's going to erase the zombie without leaving even a speck of dust behind. Bringing his hands together, the kid is instantly coated in this extremely intense blue energy. Her eyes going wide, the feline senses that this whole thing is about to blow wide open, screaming in absolute desperation as this ridiculously massive sphere of light forms right in his hands. Maintaining absolute focus, he announces his most terrifying secret barrier art, compressing everything to the absolute limit, creating a single point of darkness right in the center of the sphere. Going dead serious, he finally gives the command and tears open a highly dangerous black void. He fires the sphere with everything he's got, while the vampire can only stutter in pure shock, staring death right in the face. The corpse dragon roars one last time before the impact, triggering a colossal explosion, forcing both of them to shield themselves from the completely absurd heat, catching the vampire dead on with a brutal shockwave that just completely sweeps the field, digging her claws deep into the dirt, trying not to get blown away by the wind that's literally ripping trees out of the ground. But it's no use, and the cat gets sent flying way off into the distance, screaming in total desperation. As the dust finally settles, the protagonist checks the damage and smiles, seeing his plan worked perfectly. Coughing up a storm, Carmilla demands to know what kind of sorcery that was, and he calls it the core technique. Completely paralyzed, she repeats the name while trying to process the absolute insanity she just witnessed. He dives straight into a magical physics lesson detailing how the entire world is made up of atoms, explaining the whole concept of colliding atoms and neutrons, while the vampire doesn't understand a single word, concluding that the underlying principle must be exactly the same as a massive nuclear bomb back on Earth. Shocked, the cat processes the sheer insanity, and he confesses that he doesn't even fully understand the power himself, totally losing her mind, realizing the protagonist is throwing around an absurd power that even he doesn't comprehend, spiraling into panic over the danger, while the rest of the swarm scatters, completely terrified. She firmly declares that he's way too dangerous for messing around with things totally out of his control. He agrees on the spot, admitting that throwing around hidden power like that is a seriously dumb move. Spiraling out of control, she screams that he completely missed the point. Jumping up and down in anger, she yells that the whole problem is him being completely overpowered and out of control. Getting desperate, she demands to know what the hell that bizarre light is that literally erases things from existence. Crossing the border in the carriage, the kid thinks the place looks pretty nice and asks where they actually are. Flair jumps in and explains that they've arrived in Solodius, the massive main gateway into the Empire. Being a central hub, the streets are completely packed with people and demi-humans going every which way. Then the girl lays out the plan. The top priority right now is finding a solid place to crash for the night. After that, they can handle the guild registration, and he agrees, asking where they're going to sleep. At that, the girl pulls out a list she already had ready to go. Smiling like she just won the lottery, she shows off the paper listing all the best inns in the city. Stopping right in front of one, the kid immediately starts freezing up from pure embarrassment. Standing right outside the room, the mood gets super heavy and the tension skyrockets. Turning completely red like a tomato, he asks if it's really okay for them to share the same space. He straight up panics when he sees there's only one bed, while Flair casually flaps down on it. She stares the kid down dead serious, already losing her patience with all his stalling. Sitting up, she bluntly asks if he's turning her down, leaving the boy completely shocked. Totally flustered, he stammers out that it's nothing like that and she completely got the wrong idea. But, flashing this little knowing smile, she reveals she was totally just messing with him. A second later, with this super sweet look and open arms, she gets it and calls him over, leaving our protagonist standing there a bit dizzy, his face still burning up with embarrassment. Gathering his courage, he takes a deep breath and steps toward the girl. Flair hits him with this massive bear hug, yells, "Gotcha," and praises him for putting in the effort. Still racked in the hug, the boy admits that the journey here was absolutely crazy. She tells him he's worked way too hard and completely deserves to sleep like a rock so he can wake up brand new. Overwhelmed by all the affection, he finally drops his guard, relaxes, and completely passes out. Bright and early the next morning at the guild, he tells Carmilla about registering, and she immediately expects another disaster. Finding her pessimism a little weird, he ignores her look and guarantees nothing is going to go wrong. Looking super confident, he marches right up to the massive adventurer's building. As he gets close, the giant doors swing open all on their own, leaving his jaw completely on the floor. Seeing the hall packed wall to wall with all sorts of people, he figures the front desk must be all the way in the back. Stopping at the reception, he gives it straight to the attendant. He wants to become an adventurer. The girl slides a form across the desk and tells him to fill the whole thing out. He grabs a quill and quickly scribbles down all his info on the paper. Taking the sheet back to check it, she sees he's a mage and starts looking over his skills. Sweating bullets, the woman asks if it's actually true that the only thing he can use is barrier magic. Dead serious, the kid confirms that, yep, that's literally his only trick. The attendant smiles, totally getting the picture, and lets him know he's going to have to take a test, giving him a bit of a scare, but she quickly calms him down, saying the exam is going to be a piece of cake. Pulling a crystal ball out of a cabinet, she explains they need to measure his mana levels. Worried, he asks if a thing is going to explode, but the girl guarantees it's completely indestructible. She breaks down the process. All he has to do is touch the object and push some magic power into it, adding that his mana level will pop right up on the display, which is currently sitting at 150. Since they didn't have anything like this back in the kingdom, she confirms it's a brand new device straight from the Empire. Warning her that he's got mana to spare, he questions how tough the thing really is, but some guy suddenly interrupts him. Turning to the side, the boy asks who this annoying intruder is. A pink-haired noble introduces himself as Kamase, immediately calling our protagonist a country bumpkin. He throws out a wink, totally convinced he's the coolest guy in the room. Completely lost, the boy just listens as the annoyed guy tells him to shut his mouth. Keeping up the trash talk, the guy mocks the barrier mage, calling him totally arrogant. Having completely run out of patience, the kid tells him to get lost if he doesn't have anything useful to say. Pushing the lecture, Kamase says it's insane for a defective mage to expect an easy life. But the boy doesn't even listen, staring at the crystal with this look that says he's about to break everything. Without wasting any time, he reaches his hand straight out to the magical object. The second he touches the crystal, a massive blast of blue and purple energy makes the air around them literally crackle. Instantly, the noble goes into shock, sweating cold with his eyes practically popping right out of his head. The receptionist turns to stone, only managing to let out a tiny "huh" as she tries to process the sheer madness. Meanwhile, our protagonist just watches the absolute destruction with a little smirk, completely chill. Desperate, Kamase lets out another scream, completely unable to believe what he's seeing, yelling that this is impossible, staring right alongside the attendant at the shattered pieces of the crystal. Totally freaking out, the girl remembers that this tool was literally supposed to be indestructible. Super calm, the kid just explains that the object couldn't handle his mana and completely popped. Wiping his sweat, he reminds them he even warns them about the danger of the thing breaking. Still shaking, the receptionist calls him over for the next test, and he's just ready to get it over with. Holding up 2 fingers, she lets him know there's still an aim test and a combat trial left. Hearing that, our protagonist does a little mental celebration that he's only 2 steps away from getting his badge. Heading into the training field, the woman explains that the next challenge is just target practice. Way in the back of the room, a single target is patiently waiting to get completely wrecked. With a super simple rule, just land a hit on a target equipped with a force sensor to pass. Covered from top to bottom in magical runes, the dummy is built to take heavy hits without a single scratch. Figuring out it's a ranged damage test, the girl confirms that even using a bow is totally fine. Already cautious after the last disaster, he asks what the absolute limit of the target's durability is, guaranteeing that, thanks to the spells, the target literally cannot be broken, so he can go all out. Thinking about taking it easy to avoid completely wrecking the place again, Kamase once again ruins his piece, taunting him again. The noble claims a barrier mage is just going to completely embarrass himself attacking. Kamase then steps up to show him how it's really done, but our protagonist acts like the guy doesn't even exist. Rejecting the free lesson, the kid ignores the tantrum entirely and asks the receptionist if he's registering too. Confirming he is, the receptionist thinks it's super weird for a noble to be joining the guild and totally shuts Kamase down. Letting out a huge sigh, she makes it clear she has absolutely zero patience for dealing with spoiled brats. Watching the whole thing go down with a blank stare, completely neutral to the whole situation. Out of nowhere, Kamase lets out a dramatic yo, calling upon the scorching flames of hell. Slapping his hands on the ground, he activates a magic circle and begs the fire spirit for help, making this massive fireball grow in his hands, getting brighter and more intense by the second. He strikes this completely awkward fighting pose, gearing up for the big throw. Screaming the name of the spell, he completely launches the blazing projectile straight at the target. The spell explodes on impact, kicking up a massive cloud of smoke. Even the attendant throws him the compliment, noting that the attack actually packed a pretty decent punch. The display lights up with 132, and she praises the score for being way above average. Totally full of himself, Kamase looks over at the kid and asks if he took notes. Completely ignoring the annoying guy, the receptionist calls our protagonist up, letting him know it's finally his turn to show off. Walking super casually up to the mark, he completely readies his arm for the throw. Stepping up dead serious, the attendant asks if he completely understands what he shouldn't do. Confirming he got the memo, he promises he'll keep his absolute strongest technique tucked away. Reaching his hand out, he shapes the barrier in a completely different way just for the attack. With a single snap, he blows a giant hole completely through the wall behind the target, leaving everyone in pure shock. Leaving the target with a perfect hole right through the middle, completely obliterated by the blast. Kamase and the girl completely freeze up, sweating cold as they try to comprehend that absolutely absurd power. They let out a scream at the exact same time, completely frozen and in absolute shock at the scene. Freaking out that he just cast magic without even using an incantation, but the kid just drops a calm, "So what?" Knowing it's a super advanced technique, he honestly figured the noble didn't even know the move existed. Thinking to herself in pure horror, Carmilla finally realizes he actually knows exactly how broken he is. The woman tries to explain that casting without an incantation completely weakens the spell, but he literally obliterated everything in front of him. While Kamase stares at the pulverized target, she points out that the attack even blew straight through the wall, sticking his head into the giant hole he just made. The kid grumbles that he actually tried to hold back. At that, the noble points a finger at him and screams that it's a total lie and physically impossible, continuing his meltdown, absolutely refusing to accept that a simple barrier just turned into a literal cannon. Completely fed up, our protagonist asks what he needs to do just to get this guy to shut his mouth. Stepping in, the receptionist chimes in to remind them that the third and final test is actually combat. So the kid suggests they just settle it right there between the two of them, and the guild can use the brawl for his score. The noble glares at the protagonist, who's still standing there looking like he's just waiting for a bus. Hesitating for a second, the girl says she's totally fine with him fighting an amateur, and he quickly accepts the terms. Without wasting another second, he gets into position and tells him to hurry up, while Kamase just keeps throwing out insults, bragging that his spells are completely unbeatable, but our protagonist just brushes it off with pure disdain. With both of them ready, the receptionist yells, "Go," to officially kick off the fight. Instantly, Kamase starts his whole theatrical performance of summoning fire and begging the beyond for strength. On the other side, the kid just crosses his arms and holds up two fingers, not saying a single word, while the noble is still fully focused on prepping his giant fireball to throw at him. Our boy just whispers the word "bind" under his breath with a little smirk on his face. Laughing out loud, Kamase doubts that some basic defense spell is ever going to hold back his power. But, standing there with his arms crossed, the protagonist points out it's not a defense spell and he doesn't even need to block it, turning into an absolute monster out of pure rage. Telling the kid to go straight to hell, he screams the name of his spell again, firing the attack with absolutely everything he's got. With this massive wave of fire rocketing toward the protagonist at top speed, except, right in the middle of its path, the spell does a total U-turn, throwing Kamase into a complete panic, seeing his magic flying back at him like a flaming boomerang. All the noble can do is scream, but it's way too late. He takes his own attack head-on, letting out this incredibly pathetic cry of pain. Meanwhile, the protagonist just watches the guy get roasted with his completely ironic smirk. Mocking him, he thanks the noble for his cooperation, since he didn't even try to block his own attack. Completely scorched and lying on the floor, Kamase mutters, trying to figure out what just went wrong. Explaining he simply reflected the spell using a barrier, he tells him to take a good look around, realizing he's trapped right inside a glowing dome, while the protagonist breaks down exactly what trick he used. Kamase's brain basically short-circuits trying to process how someone just deflected pure magic, but the kid assures him this is basically child's play for anyone who actually masters barrier magic. Laid out and totally humiliated, the pink-haired guy can only stutter out that what just happened is impossible, clapping and calling it a complete spectacle. The receptionist officially confirms he passed with flying colors, totally killing the celebratory vibe. The kid asks what they're supposed to do with the dead body over there. Looking a bit awkward, the girl glances at the knocked-out noble and confirms that, technically speaking, he passed too. Right then, a veteran walks up and points out that Kamase has the mana. He's just completely lacking a brain. Watching the whole thing, Carmilla seriously wonders if our protagonist is just naturally confident or totally dense. Flashing her official customer service smile, the receptionist welcomes Mr. Rakuto Guardman to the guild. telling him it's an absolute honor to have someone with his talent, making the boy puff out his chest with pride. Finally cracking a genuine smile, he's officially a licensed adventurer now, complete with the badge to prove it. Super excited about the whole situation, the attendant formally introduces herself as Ranka. Ready to get right to work and already thinking about the cash, the protagonist asks if they buy monsters. Confirming they do right away, she asks about the trophy, which he says he just took down on his way there. He makes a move to put it right on the counter, but she quickly stops him, warning him that's not going to work. Confused, he asks why he can't just show them the merchandise right then and there. Raka explains that the reason is incredibly simple. The monster literally will not fit inside the guild building, giving him this super confused look, having absolutely no idea just how massive the problem actually is. Without hesitating, the kid just drops a "then check this out" and uses his magic to summon his prize. And out of nowhere, an absolutely colossal dragon appears right in the middle of the hall, throwing Ranka into total shock. Letting out this high-pitched scream, she asks in pure desperation where the heck he just pulled that monster from. Thinking her reaction is a bit much, the kid asks if she's never seen spatial magic before. At that, the girl reminds him that he literally just told them he only does barriers, and he replies that with enough effort it's basically the same thing, thinking it takes way more than just trying, but he firmly insists it all comes down to pure dedication. Completely out of arguments, all the receptionist can manage to stutter out is a totally dumbfounded wow. Seeing that Ranka has completely given up on understanding his logic, the kid asks what the actual problem is. Right then, a huge crowd gathers around the dragon, completely shocked by how perfectly intact the beast is. Still half in shock herself, she asks how he managed to take down the beast, and he just says he choked it out. Her brain totally glitching out, the woman asks if he seriously drowned the thing in a bucket of water or something. Shutting that down immediately, he reveals he used a barrier to suffocate it, leaving the entire crowd completely speechless. Pretty soon, the people around start whispering that he has to be lying since absolutely nobody takes down a dragon like that, so our protagonist breaks it down to the basics. He literally just wrapped the monster's head up in a barrier, and then, with a quick glow of his hand, he just sucked all the air right out of it. Simple as that, leaving Ranka entirely lost, her head practically spinning with question marks. Realizing that instead of actually explaining anything, he just completely fried everyone's brain in the room. Sweating nervously, the girl admits that explanation was just way too complex for her to wrap her head around. Apologizing for the total mindbender, he swears he didn't pull any kind of trick during the hunt. But Ranka just flashes a smile and says it's completely fine, since they literally just saw his strength with their own eyes. Feeling a little awkward from the compliment, the kid just quietly mutters her name. Meanwhile, the whole crowd goes right back to admiring the green dragon, still sitting perfectly intact right on the floor. Then comes the absolute buzzkill. She tells him they literally can't buy the beast, and our protagonist completely freaks out. She explains that a perfectly intact dragon costs an absolute fortune, and the guild just doesn't have that kind of cash lying around. Completely outraged, he asks if the woman is seriously trying to mess with him. As Ranka bends over backwards apologizing, he accepts it and totally understands that their budget is tight. Just so the trip wasn't a total waste, the kid immediately demands absolutely any mission they have available. Asking if they have anything involving picking weeds, she hands him a request to gather a kilo of herbs. Without giving it a second thought, he takes the job on the spot without complaining at all. Then the attendant hands him the paper laying out every single detail for the job, warning him that he has to bring the sheet back along with the items if he wants to get paid. Thanking her immediately, he gets the message and quickly heads right up the stairs of the building. With this totally focused look, getting completely ready to make his grand official debut. Out of nowhere, Kamase shows up, mocking him and saying picking weeds is the absolute perfect job for a total loser. Looking back at him, our protagonist thinks it's a bit weird. The noble stops smoking and is already looking completely fine, bragging that he's going out to hunt actual monsters, earning nothing but a long, tired sigh from the kid. Keeping up the trash talk, he warns him that since he only knows how to defend, he really shouldn't even step into the woods. Catching on that the noble is actually just terrified of getting completely outshined, but the guy denies it, claiming it's just friendly advice. Turning his back with total arrogance, the guy storms off, leaving our boys group just standing there. Right after, Carmilla asks if the guy is completely brain dead to still be underestimating our protagonist after the absolute show he just put on. But our boy just gives it to her straight, saying people only ever see exactly what they want to see. Not giving a single care about the jealous noble, he decides it's finally time to go grab those herbs, heading out of the city and straight toward the mission, with his partner following closely behind him. And without a single warning, he completely shouts out the command for his bind spell. In a blur, he grabs the girl and launches the two of them straight into the sky at an absolutely ridiculous speed. Going into complete panic mode, the girl lets out this super desperate scream from way up high. A few seconds later, our protagonist touches down totally gracefully and lets her know they've arrived at the spot. Still shaking from the total shock, she yells at him to stop acting like casually flying is a totally normal thing to do. Completely confused by why she's freaking out, he asks what the huge problem is this time, wanting to know how on earth they just flew, since he literally only does barriers. And he casually tells her he just used a barrier. Hearing that answer, the girl's brain completely short-circuits on the spot, totally losing her mind. She screams that absolutely none of this makes any sense, and completely refuses to accept his crazy logic. With endless patience, the kid replies that, in theory, the whole thing is actually super basic. He quickly picks up a rock from the ground to give his partner a little physics lesson, explaining that since a barrier takes up physical space, all you have to do is lock the structure to a specific coordinate. Then, he tosses a rock straight into the glowing barrier floating right there in midair. And since the space inside doesn't fall, the rock just sits there, so all you have to do is command the structure to move. Wrapping up his logic, if he wraps himself in a barrier and commands it to move, he's effectively flying. Her jaw completely on the floor, the girl comments that the way he uses barriers is absolutely absurd, but he decides it's time to get to work, and straight up refuses the botany manual she tries to hand him. Dropping another bind, he explains he just threw a barrier over the entire forest and now the real magic starts. As he makes a quick hand sign, his partner immediately senses the whole vibe in the air get weird, and the massive barrier that was covering the horizon suddenly starts shrinking down, with the magical structure closing in hard, completely shrinking in size by the second. The force field keeps contracting until it turns into a tiny glowing sphere right in the palm of his hand. Once the light fades, a literal mountain of herbs pops out, proving he completely wiped out the forest's entire supply. Laughing, he explains that as the bubble shrank, he just set a filter to let anything that wasn't an herb pass right through. His partner catches on right away, and the kid immediately uses his storage spell to pack up the massive haul. Completely speechless, the girl finds it unbelievable that he just instantly cleared the mission like that and calls him a genius. Taking the compliment in stride, he decides it's been a productive day and it's officially time to head back. But a desperate scream totally shatters the peace, and our boy's expression changes in a heartbeat. Recognizing the yelling, Carmilla asks if it's that totally unbearable noble guy again. With a dead serious look, the protagonist confirms that the tone of pure desperation sounds extremely familiar, and without a second thought, he launches himself through the sky, a total blur headed straight toward the noise. On the way there, the girl asks if he's seriously going to save that annoying guy, but he says he wouldn't just leave him to die. Giving it to her straight, saying a few dumb insults aren't enough of a reason to let someone get eaten alive. With a slight smile, the girl calls him a total weirdo, but admits he's actually a pretty great guy. Casually accepting the compliment, the kid spots the absolute chaos unfolding right down below, with a mutant boar hot on the heels of Kamase and his entire party of girls. The noble and the girls are running for their lives, with the beast practically breathing right down their necks. Kamase is in such extreme panic that his face literally looks like a cartoon caricature of pure fear. Just then, our boy drops down from the clouds, totally ready to end this little game once and for all. Spotting the protagonist, the cowardly noble yells for his team to scatter, so the monster goes after him instead, and the scumbag noble screams right back that protecting his own skin obviously comes first. But mid-run, he slams face first into an invisible wall and lets out this completely bizarre yelp. Trapped inside the protagonist's barrier and told to shut up, the kid still catches an insult from him. Ignoring the useless guy's total lack of manners, he focuses on the counterattack and immediately triggers the rebound. Slamming into the defense, the boar is launched straight up into the air, taking one of the girls with it on impact, with the beast's eyes going wide from the pain, having absolutely no idea where that invisible hit came from. Landing completely unfazed, the protagonist asks the girl if she's still in one piece. Sitting on the ground and still super dizzy, she looks up at him and barely stutters out a thank you. Completely focused on the battle that definitely isn't over yet, he tells her to save the thank yous for later. Totally confused by the warning, the girl repeats, later, having no idea what kind of danger is coming next. At that exact second, a guttural roar from the shadows of the forest makes the ground ground shake violently, letting out a high-pitched squeak. Kamase immediately identifies the incoming nightmare, and Orc King just showed up, and the monster steps into the scene, this absolutely massive brute, totally ready to slaughter everyone in sight. Having a total meltdown, the noble announces the beast is a B rank, and their death warrants are basically signed, dropping to his knees and literally crying for his mom, while the protagonist just watches the pathetic display. Letting out another completely ferocious roar, the Orc King decides to charge the entire group all at once. The creature completely goes all in, putting absolutely everything it's got into crushing our boy like a bug. But the protagonist doesn't even flinch, just flashing that little smirk and keeping his absolute cool. He activates his magic, weaving a network of glowing blue threads through the air, just waiting for the impact. In the blink of an eye, the Orc King is sliced into absolute mincemeat, leaving the girls completely speechless. He even drops the name of the trick, Barrier Morphosis, offensive patterned thread, explaining the ultra-thin net. But Kamase on the ground still absolutely refuses to accept losing to the defective mage, just sitting there frozen, grinding his teeth because he got completely outshined yet again. With an ice-cold look, the protagonist stares straight down at the pink-haired guy, giving him a harsh truth. If he just assumes everything is impossible before even trying, he's literally never going to grow. Cutting back to the guild, the kid notices a massive uproar and instantly smells trouble, commenting that the noise inside sounds exactly like someone just kicked a giant anthill. Walking in, he sees this massive crowd swarming the front desk, with absolutely everyone losing their minds. The mob closing in on the reception area, leaving Ranka looking like she's absolutely ready to quit on the spot. Stepping up, he asks what the drama is this time, and the girl recognizes him immediately, saying he literally fell from heaven. Ranka immediately asks if he brought back the herbs from the mission. Finding her rush super weird, he watches the girl confirm that the demand just completely skyrocketed. Right then, a man with a mustache chimes in to back up the request, and the protagonist asks how much they need. Holding up a single finger, the man drops a bombshell, asking for a solid 100 kilos of the stuff. Repeating the number, the kid immediately starts doing the math in his head. Noticing his silence, the old man gets totally deflated, asking if he aimed a little too high. But the hero casually drops that he's actually got 500 kilos in his stash, leaving the man totally speechless. Ranka almost falls over from how ridiculously fast he pulled that off, and he admits he got a little carried away gathering. Still unable to believe it, the man asks if he's serious, and the protagonist's hand immediately starts glowing. In a bright flash, a literal mountain of herbs drops onto the floor, and the man immediately wants to buy out the entire stock. With the deal done, the kid quickly asks if there are a ton of injured people out there. Confirming exactly that, the old man explains that total chaos broke out in a buddy's town, explaining he got a totally desperate SOS call begging for more potions from their stock. At that, a magical light starts glowing as the protagonist prepares an absolute golden offer, offering to go straight into the eye of the storm himself and patch everyone up. The two of them totally freeze. The old man thinks he's a healer, but the protagonist quickly clarifies he actually just does barriers. Without a whole lot of options, the man decides to bet absolutely everything on the stranger. Surprised by how easy that was, our hero asks if he really trusts some random guy that much. Breaking into a smile, the old man guarantees his gut instinct for good character is completely flawless. He just stands there trying to process the absolute weight of this blind trust he just earned. Shaking his hand, the man says those people's lives are completely in the protagonist's hands now. Asking where all this chaos is happening, he finds out the disaster is hitting the town of Itue. The second he hears the name, it immediately clicks that it's right next door to his actual hometown. Talking about getting a carriage ready, the old man quickly finds out that's basically ancient history. Completely lost, the man asks how on earth they're gonna get there in time, and then the light show kicks off, with a bunch of magical cubes popping up right out of thin air, explaining he already knows the route and can just fly everyone there in absolutely no time at all. Shocked, the man asks if he's suddenly doing teleportation side gigs too. Confirming it all, he tells him to hang on tight, and in a massive flash of light, they completely vanish from the spot. Barely having time to blink, the old man opens his eyes, screaming out loud from the absolute shock of the trip. Stunned by the technique, he asks who the heck he really is, but just gets the same old defective mage excuse. But the man shoots back that it just makes the whole thing even more insane, totally thrilled with his choice. With a little smirk on his face, our boy warns him the clock is totally ticking. Sharpening his gaze, he completely locks in on helping the injured crowd. But, stepping right into the war zone, he lets out a massive, "What the heck is going on here?" Down below, a massive horde of orcs is completely steamrolling the local defenders. Basically just these giant, totally enraged beasts ready to completely tear the place apart, making our heroes seriously question if those freaks are even normal orcs at all. Standing face to face with the absolute swarm of monsters, the locals are desperately trying to hold back. Charging full speed ahead, the horde completely runs over the adventurers with terrifying force. Seeing this, the guy with the mustache almost has a heart attack, explaining that it's a literal monster parade. Catching on to the situation, our hero realizes the beasts have completely lost their minds from starvation. Right in front of them, the Legion stares down the warriors, just waiting for the signal to strike. Without wasting a single second, our kid's hand immediately starts to glow. Conjuring up a shield, he tells the merchant to stay inside so he doesn't end up as monster food. Completely terrified, the man desperately asks what the plan is this time. With a confident look, the kid tells him he's gonna wrap this up quickly and casts Bind. As he holds out his hand, a massive wave of heavy energy fills the entire area. Suddenly, a giant barrier bursts from the ground, completely separating the warriors from the monsters. This leaves one of the warriors totally dumbfounded, trying to wrap his head around what kind of magic that was. With a subtle flick of his wrist, our hero changes the rules of the game and alters the shield's properties. Right after, an adventurer tries to strike a beast, and his sword passes straight through the barrier like smoke. But when the orc tries to strike back, it hits a brick wall since the barrier perfectly blocks its attack. Yelling that the coast is clear, the crew takes the chance to retreat safely behind the wall. That's when they realize the spell actually trapped all the beasts, creating a massive magical cage. The old man assumes the group is about to launch a combined attack, but our protagonist waves off the idea. Looking totally confused, the guy asks what the actual plan is then. Clenching his fist tight, the giant dome simply starts to shrink. Someone points in absolute shock, watching as the monsters inside are getting completely crushed. Contracting without any mercy, the magic squeezes the entire horde into a tiny, compact space. And even though it's a pretty brutal method to mash them all together, the group has to admit it gets the job done. Seeing the threat turn to dust, the warriors raise their swords and start cheering. Joining the celebration, the mustached guy thanks the hero for preventing a total disaster. Satisfied with a job well done, our kid just gives a subtle little smirk. Right after that, he brings his healing magic inside a church packed with the wounded. As a warm golden aura fills the room, you can see the relief instantly wash over everyone's faces. One of the guys stares at his hands in pure shock, watching his scars vanish like a magic trick. Walking to the hall, our hero is being closely watched by a cat with a red collar. Completely focused on his work, he keeps casting his magic on those who need it most. Suddenly, a desperate scream pierces the air as a woman cries over a lifeless body. Sobbing uncontrollably, she asks why fate had to be so cruel to him. Stopping dead in their tracks, the duo watches this completely heartbreaking scene unfold. After standing in silence for a moment, our protagonist's expression turns dead serious. Now that the danger is over, the old man thanks him and calls him a hero, but the kid brushes it off. The old man suggests they head back to collect their reward, but he quickly hears that the job isn't quite done yet. Staring the guy down with an intense look, he already knows exactly what he has to do next. This leaves the merchant completely lost, having no idea what else is left to handle. He looks back over at the woman who is still weeping over the loss of her companion. Then he drops the bombshell that he hasn't saved everyone yet, making the old man turn pale with shock. The cat almost falls over backwards, completely unable to believe he's actually thinking about bringing someone back from the dead. He just hits her with a blunt and confident yes. Sweating bullets, the feline demands to know if he seriously has that kind of broken ability. He doubles down and says he can pull it off, radiating absolute confidence. This makes the cat nearly have a nervous breakdown, baring her teeth because she's so worked up, throwing an absolute fit. The little mascot straight up tells him he's lost his damn mind. She rolls around on the floor in a massive mix of anger and pure frustration. Screaming at the top of her lungs, she says bringing someone back from the afterlife is literally impossible. End of story. But our boy seats back, swearing that it actually works, completely catching the feline off guard. He admits that the conditions are pretty harsh, but he's already warming up his hands to perform a miracle. He manifests a secret art, and a blinding white energy instantly takes over the room. And this technique is called Pure Realm Construction. Absolutely shocked by his power, the cat explains that this spell creates sacred ground worthy of the gods. She realizes the kid completely wiped away all impurities in the area to create his own divine domain. now rocking blue hair, he praises the little beast, who proudly claims she hasn't lived for centuries for nothing, and she figures out that our hero is basically building an artificial heaven just to fish the guy's soul back. Just then, a bright glow appears on the guy's chest, showing that his soul has successfully returned to his body. Completely dialed in, the protagonist confirms the first phase is a total success. Now all that's left is to simply fix the massive physical damage on the guy's body, showing signs of life. The man groans like he's just waking up from a terrible nightmare. Waking up completely disoriented, he's instantly tackled into a tearful, joyful hug. This leaves the entire crowd's jaws on the floor, and the cat is absolutely stunned to witness a literal resurrection right in front of her. She thinks to herself that summoning a soul back from the dead is definitely not something a normal human can do. Trying to stay humble, our hero points out that it only works if the body is still fully intact, but the feline insists that it's still a completely broken life hack no matter how you look at it. Getting that classic anime sweat drop, he feels pretty awkward about everyone staring at him in total awe. Out of nowhere, the entire crowd drops to their knees in pure reverence, leaving the kid totally confused. He goes into full-blown panic mode, having zero clue how to handle a whole room of people worshipping him. One guy even yells that the proof is right there in front of them, and this young man must be a literal god, which only dials up our hero's desperation as he gets slapped with this new divine title. To make matters worse, a giant cross starts glowing in the church, adding a wildly theatrical touch to the whole scene. Feeling super embarrassed, he tries to deny everything, swearing up and down that he's not some kind of deity. Not knowing where to hide his face, he spins around and bolts out of there with the elf right on his heels. Once they're out on the street, the two keep walking as the girl grumbles, clearly bothered by everything that just happened. Stopping in her tracks, she demands to know what he really is, which leaves him looking super confused. She completely goes off, bringing up the armies he wiped out and the fact that he just brought a guy back from the dead. She screams that absolutely none of this is normal and demands to know where he got this ridiculous strength. He just stands there quietly, waiting for the elf to run out of breath. Then he explains that his master taught him everything by focusing strictly on attributeless magic. He asks if she knows about the 6 basic magic elements in their world. He lists them off: earth, water, fire, wind, light, and darkness as the standard types of magic. He points out that his magic breaks all those rules, and his master was the one who taught him how to use it so well. Thinking it over, the girl asks if this mentor is actually even stronger than he is. He confirms that she's on a whole other level, making the elf super eager to find out this legend's name. He reveals that he has no clue where she is now, but her name is Lava Marie. The second she hears that name, the elf completely freezes, her jaw dropping in absolute shock. Finding her reaction pretty weird, he watches as the girl stammers out the name. She explains that Lavaravary is literally one of the 8 strongest mages in the entire world. She's famously known as the Witch of the World. Adding to her resume, she's also known as the Guardian of the Underworld. Looking a bit confused, our hero asks which of those 2 titles is actually her real one, and the girl points out that the Guardian title comes from her actual job. Continuing her little history lesson, she explains that this witch guards the realm of the dead, making absolutely sure that no wandering souls try to sneak out for a little stroll on the surface. We then get a shot of the solitary mage standing on a dark, creepy cliff. Looking completely menacing, she's surrounded by lightning strikes and glowing red eyes hiding in the shadows, proving that she is quite literally every demon's absolute worst nightmare. Finally connecting the dots, the elf yells that his ridiculous strength actually makes total sense now. She gives a little smirk, concluding that any student of that legend could never turn out weak. Backing up her point, he casually drops that the witch used to beat down ancient dragons with her bare hands. Looking away, he just drops a casual, "Yeah, a lot happened," perfectly summarizing all the drama. We then get a quick flashback showing the kid out in the rain with the witch staring him down. Meanwhile, the elf starts whining, thinking she has some terrible luck to end up mixed up with the student of an absolute legend. Just watching her dramatic little meltdown from the sidelines, the kid decides to just keep his mouth shut. When he tries to offer some support, the elf snaps back that he's the absolute last person who should be giving advice. Back at the guild, our hero figures he's helped enough people for one day and considers his shift officially over. Trying to make a sneaky exit, the receptionist immediately yells at him not to run off just yet. The mustache guy even grabs his arm, practically begging him for just one more minute of his time. He turns around, giving them that classic "what is it now" look. Hearing that the guildmaster wants to have a little chat, the kid instantly finds the whole thing pretty suspicious. Even though the girl insists it's super serious, our hero really only cares about getting back to his bed. With all the pushing, even the cat gives him a look like he should just get the meeting over with. Muttering a quick apology to Ronka, he casts a spell to completely freeze her in time. Leaving the poor receptionist standing there like a statue without even blinking, he leans in close, With a cynical little smirk, he whispers right in her ear that this meeting is gonna have to wait until next time. And just like that, the kid and the cat completely bolt before time starts moving again. Once Renka unfreezes, she's left standing there totally lost, having zero clue where the guy went. Walking back home, our hero feels like today packed a whole month's worth of work into a few hours. He's closely followed by the cat, who rubs up against his leg just like a totally normal pet. He replays the whole day in his head, starting right from the massive headache of getting registered at the guild, then going through the absolute trial by fire that was his first official mission, all the way up to pulling off that insanely broken magic back at the church, concluding that he's definitely earned the right to be exhausted. But his energy comes rushing right back the second he turns the doorknob to his house, because Flair is already waiting to welcome him back, excitedly shouting his name the moment he steps in. She comes running in for a massive welcome home hug, practically jumping for joy. She looks up at our hero with that incredibly sweet smile that only she can pull off. Feeling a huge wave of relief, he realizes that seeing her smile is enough to cure all his exhaustion. Heading into the bedroom, the feline hops right onto the bed while the blonde asks how his day at work went. The little beast just shoots him a look like, "I know exactly what kind of crazy stuff you pulled today." Completely drained, our protagonist just collapses onto the bed. He casually mentions that his shift ended up running way longer than he originally planned. After he sums up all the chaos from the day, the blonde just smiles patiently and praises him for his hard work. He tells her that, unlike back in his home country, the people here actually appreciate what he does. He thinks back to Ronka's friendly smile at the guild while he vents to her, and he goes on, saying how glad he is that the old merchant really put his faith in his abilities. But he also admits he ran into a really annoying guy, flashing back to that bubblegum-haired jerk. He admits he was honestly pretty terrified after getting kicked out of his homeland. But thanks to all these new people, he really feels like he can make it in this world and give them both a comfortable life. Staring her right in the eyes, he swears he's going to make Fleur the happiest girl in the entire world. Turning as red as a tomato, she is completely caught off guard by the sudden, romantic confession. She just sits there speechless for a few seconds, trying to process this massive declaration. And right after that, she throws herself into his arms again without a second thought, squeezing our protagonist in an absolutely massive bear hug. She confesses that she loved hearing those sweet words, but just being by his side is already the greatest prize she could ask for. She just asks him for one thing, that he doesn't try to carry the weight of the whole world on his shoulders. Getting a little flustered by the moment, our hero agrees and promises he'll keep that in mind. The two of them just stay there holding each other on the bed, enjoying a really peaceful moment together. Up on the chair, the cat doesn't miss a single detail, watching the whole romantic scene play out, seeming to totally approve of the couple. The little mascot flashes a very satisfied smirk. Getting comfortable, Fleur quickly dozes off, feeling completely safe in the barrier master's arms. Watching the couple from across the room, the feline just licks its paw, acting like she doesn't care at all. Meanwhile, the blonde stays right there, completely out cold and sleeping like a baby. The little beast looks a bit deep in thought for a second, but decides it was probably nothing, and relaxes. A few days later, our boy finally decides to show his face at the guild again. Walking in, he remembers how he totally ghosted the guild master as soon as Ronka brings up the meeting again, and looking at the receptionist's super tense expression, he instantly figures out this whole thing is about the monsters. She stares the kid down with an intense level of determination that's honestly a little scary. Praying he's not walking into a massive trap, he hears that the boss has a very special request for him. Feeling super relieved that it's just a standard mission, he lets out a breath and relaxes his shoulders. He casually accepts the invite, telling her he's ready to hear what the guy has to say. Walking up the stairs, a voice immediately greets him, asking if he's the famous Rakuto. The guy wastes no time offering our hero a seat so they can get down to business. Sitting across from the big shot, our protagonist realizes something seriously weird has popped up in the area lately. It turns out it's some mysterious ruin that literally just sprouted out of the ground out of nowhere. He repeats the word ruin with a look that says he already knows this job is going to be a huge pain. The master explains that the whole place is completely swarming with monsters that look like lifeless corpses. He instantly realizes that the real issue here is dealing with a bunch of walking dead, and the boss confirms it, warning him that there's actually a leader pulling the strings of this creepy legion. Seeing how stressed the guy is, the kid asks if they've tried attacking the boss, but he hears that absolutely nothing leaves a scratch on it. Looking like he hasn't slept in days, the old man reveals that even their elite fighters came back totally defeated. Concluding that the monster is practically immortal, he He starts suspecting it might be another one of Carmilla's old buddies. Right and cue, the vampire chimes in his head, agreeing and warning him that the only way to beat it is by sealing it away. Getting the picture, our boy arrogantly guarantees that he's the only one who can actually fix this mess. The master brings up how he literally soloed an impossible mission not that long ago. Because of that track record, the old man is deciding to bet all his chips on our kid's crazy skills. Long story short, he just needs to go to the ruin and wipe out the boss, so he gladly accepts the mission. Caught completely off guard by how fast he agreed, the master is practically celebrating. Locking it in, our protagonist just warns him that he expects a massive payday for this kind of work. The boss immediately guarantees that the reward will definitely match the insane difficulty of the job. Without wasting another second, he turns around and heads out of the office, completely ready for action. He arrives at a totally deserted village that looks straight out of a horror movie. When a voice asks what he's doing out there, he explains that he's just here to check out the dungeon. He starts scanning every single corner of the village with a really sharp eye. Carmilla comments in his head that the energy in this place feels insanely heavy and corrupted. Just then, our hero activates his sonar, leaving the vampire totally confused by the modern term. He fires off a massive pulse of blue energy that starts sweeping through the entire area. It forms a giant hexagonal barrier that practically swallows the entire village whole. The energy then snaps back to his hand as he processes a complete mental map of the area. He quickly detects that there are still 2 kids hiding right in the middle of this mess. Suddenly, the voice in his head screams in pure panic, telling him not to move a muscle. Super curious about his magic, she listens as he explains it's a support barrier used to track life signs. Carmilla immediately asks if that means those 2 kids are the only living souls left in this ghost town. With a sharp glint in his eye, our protagonist corrects her. There are only 2 living humans here, but the rest have just changed. We then see the creepy silhouette of an undead monster lurking right there in the shadows. Even Carmilla feels a chill run down her spine at how insanely calm and dry the kid sounds. He casually explains that he sensed things moving around that weren't breathing, and sure enough, the monsters start revealing themselves. They let out a bizarre, twisted roar that would make any normal person completely freeze in terror. But despite the horror show, our hero just stands there looking completely unbothered, like this is just another Tuesday, staring down this absolute freak of nature with a look that says he's about to end this in 2 seconds flat. Meanwhile, Carmilla completely loses it, screaming in absolute panic inside his head. Stepping out of the shadows, a zombie finally shows its face in the light, ready to strike. Absolutely horrified, the voice in the hero's head screams at the sight of this bizarre walking corpse. She warns him that a single bite is all it takes to turn into a zombie snack, but he doesn't even care. Losing her patience, the vampire tells him to stop messing around and just wipe it out already. But our hero refuses, swearing he's not going to kill the poor girl, and tells her to shut up. When the monster lunges for a bite, the vampire practically feels the teeth on her own neck from sheer terror. But our protagonist simply stops the zombie dead in its tracks, blocking the attack mid-air with just one hand, completely dominating the situation without breaking a single drop of sweat. The monster ends up chomping down on an invisible wall right in front of the kid's nose. He explains that this spell is his barrier armor, which leaves Carmilla totally dumbfounded. She says that this kind of magic requires an insane amount of focus just to work properly, and creating something that's strong in the blink of an eye is ridiculously broken, catching him a bit off guard. Calmly staring at the zombie, he asks for a quick second to fix the damage. This completely breaks the voice's brain, and she asks what the hell he means by fixing a dead person. He just ignores her skepticism and holds his hand out toward the creature. Right after, a massive wave of intense healing light completely engulfs the girl's body. Recognizing the glow, Carmilla realizes it's the exact same magic he used on the people at the church. The protagonist nods, admitting that the foundation of the spell is pretty much the same. She instantly fires back, saying that turning into a zombie isn't just some common cold you can cure with a flashlight. Brushing it off, he announces that the job is done, leaving the vampire totally confused. Just like that, the girl turns back into a human, able to feel her own body again. She stares at her own hands, having no idea how she stopped being a monster so fast. Freaking out over what she just witnessed, the vampire demands a logical explanation for this nonsense. And, super calmly, he says he just turned back the clock inside the barrier, leaving her completely lost. While she screams about how insane that concept is, the recently cured girl just thinks he's talking to himself. Feeling some serious murderous intent, Carmilla's voice actually starts growling from sheer frustration. She finally explodes into a yell, calling the kid an unbelievably annoying brat. After clearing out the entire infested village, our hero finally manages to enter the dungeon. He casually strolls down the super damp stone corridors of the place, only to come face to face with 2 more walking corpses dragging themselves right toward him. Letting out a classic zombie roar, one of them lunges forward to try its luck, but our hero just flashes his healing light, making them good as new in a snap of his fingers. While the guys thank him like they just saw a literal god, our protagonist just walks right past them. He does take the chance to ask what they remembered before going on that crazy zombie diet. One guy explains that their whole group went deep down exploring the lowest levels of the dungeon, where they found a gigantic door, and that was basically the last memory burned into their minds. The rest of the crew nods along, agreeing that everything went black right after that. Getting a bit pensive, our boy starts pondering what could actually be hiding down there. He stares into the darkness with a sharp look, super focused on uncovering the mystery. Going back to exploring the area, he decides to head even deeper into the stone corridors. Gripping the glowing crucifix on his chest, he pushes forward. Meanwhile, Carmilla is grumbling that the hero is, without a doubt, the weirdest guy on earth. She complains that he's just playing hero, constantly healing people and sending them back to the village. Staring at him with deep suspicion, unable to wrap her head around where all this kindness comes from, our protagonist quickly shoots back that it wouldn't be fair to help one person and just leave the rest out to dry. The vampire just huffs at the kid's attempt to play the modest hero once again. She yells that teleportation is literally an elite tier magic, having no clue how he uses it so effortlessly. Doubling down on his earlier lesson, he explains that barriers always manipulate the local space. By doing that, he basically cuts reality in half, creating an inside and an outside space. And deep down, it's basically like he just stitches the two locations around him straight to his desired target, watching him travel between 2 points in a blink. Carmilla says the more she listens, the less she understands. Then she lets slip that the hero is just like them. The kid gets super curious and immediately wants to know who exactly she's talking about. The cat starts talking about her vampire relatives, but bites her tongue mid-sentence. He pushes her to spill the beans, but the cat warns that just saying their name aloud would leave barely anything of her left to tell the story afterward. She stays there trembling in fear, even if it's just her imagination running wild. He repeats the word them, starting to connect the dots as he notices her terrified look, concluding that they're definitely talking about the elite, the so-called high vampire clan. Right in the middle of this little chat, more zombies pop out from the dark corridor, and in the blink of an eye, the creatures come charging right at the duo with everything they've got. He casually comments that sooner or later she was going to find out the truth anyway. The two of them push deeper into the dungeon to finish the mission, finally reaching the absolute lowest floor of the entire place, where they spot the giant door, and our protagonist confirms this is definitely the final stop. He stares down the gate with a look that says he knows things are about to get real. Pushing it open, they finally step inside the main hall, where they come face to face with an imposing figure on a throne, completely surrounded by a massive guard. A blue-haired woman is sitting right there wearing glasses and definitely trying to show who's boss. She just cracks a little smirk, carefully sizing up the newly arrived duo. Meanwhile, our boy stares right back from a distance and immediately calls it. She's the elite high vampire. Carmilla goes into full panic mode, asking how he could be so sure about that out of nowhere. The hero points out that it was the cat's intense fear from earlier, noticing that this woman's mana actually felt pretty weak. He closes his eyes, getting fully prepped to just completely steamroll her. Right on cue, the zombie guards start growling, gearing up to attack the two intruders. They slowly rise to their feet with a terrifying, hate-filled groan. The cat warns him that the situation is terrible, but he already knew that, and she really doesn't like how cold-blooded he's being. You can easily see how well-maintained and lethally sharp their weapons are, gripping their swords tight, ready to slice up anyone foolish enough to step inside. And in a crazy scene, the undead horde goes flying forward to attack and crush the duo once and for all. He realizes they're all former martial arts masters, figuring out that this woman is basically treating the whole thing like a video game. Just then, a bright light fills the entire area and blasts the targets far away from him. The impact from the kid's defense is so strong, it even bends their swords and sends the shockwave vibrating right back. The cat notices the elite's reaction, also surprised by what happened to the swords. While our hero finds the whole thing pretty amusing, the cat just thinks it's weird. He follows up by stating he's gonna push through anyway and wrap this up real soon. He readies his plan right there and activates a move he calls Rebound, repelling the horde and knocking the entire gang all the way to the far corners of the room, hitting the undead so hard it practically leaves them crying from the sheer force, showing a heavy, brutal smack directly to the enemy's face. Totally surprised, the boss lady rolls her eyes, realizing this is about to get intense. The cat even chimes in, only to immediately hear him ask if it's broken or not, clearing everything up and showing how useful it is in a good, fair fight. Dropping the argument, the white-haired cat just nods in agreement. Laughing from her throne, the boss finds the whole situation pretty amusing. Right from the start, she thinks it's great, genuinely admiring the old-school tactics playing out in front of her. Gathering her thoughts, she slowly looks around at the crew before locking eyes back on him, holding nothing back and hyper-focusing so the fight gets intense. Totally unafraid to throw down right there, she asks a quick question, and he bluntly tells her he's gonna tie her up and seal her away for good, acting just as comical and cynical as he always does when showing up to the main event. Laughing right in his face, she asks if he has any idea who he's messing with, but our hero doesn't even flinch. Keeping his eyes locked dead on her, he simply states he's only here to get the job done and bounce. Meanwhile, the woman toys with a golden scale and casually labels the kid a fascinating little insect. Rising from her throne, she decides to kill some time playing around with the outsider. Flashing a wicked smile, the beauty introduces herself as the famous Libra of the scale, and seeing the object glowing with pure energy, it's pretty obvious it's not just some cheap decoration. Baring her fangs, the villain orders her lackeys to do all the dirty work for her. She commands the horde to trample the kid without mercy, sending the entire undead army charging forward. It's a massive wave of monsters rushing the duel like there's no tomorrow. One of them lets out a roar of pure hatred that literally makes the entire hall shake. This bizarre zombie tsunami completely surrounds our boy and Carmilla. They throw themselves at them with everything they've got, desperately trying to bury the two heroes alive, but they run straight into a brick wall as a glowing barrier pops up to shield them. Shaking in her boots, the cat notices that the beasts just keep pushing forward like absolute maniacs, but our protagonist calmly points out that brainless monsters don't exactly have an off switch. He carefully analyzes the chaos, already calculating his next move in the fight. He realizes the horde's pressure is brutal, and these monsters aren't showing a single sign of fatigue. Another one lets out a freaky shriek, proving that backing down just isn't an option for them. Activating Rebound once again, the barrier explodes outward and sends the front row flying. The only problem is their numbers seem infinite, with another wave immediately charging right at them. It turns into a crazy endless loop of low-level grunts throwing themselves against his shield. This makes the kid realize that just sweeping away the small fry isn't going to get them anywhere. He decides to nip the problem in the bud and focus his attack straight on the boss. With his hand glowing blindingly bright, he starts charging up his stellar bullet attack. He fires off a beam of light that completely tears through the air, piercing the undead crowd like wet paper. It blasts right through the targets without mercy, leaving a massive, gaping hole in the creature's chests. The blast radius is so perfectly clean it's clear proof of how devastating that super shot really is. But the beam doesn't stop there. It keeps going in a dead straight line, straight for Libra's head. Flashing a smug little smile, the vampire just raises a single finger to block the attack. And with one simple touch, she deflects the colossal strike off to the side like she's swatting a fly. This genuinely catches our hero off guard, surprised by how easily she just casually nullified a high-level spell. Watching the beam explode against the ceiling, the cat almost falls over backwards, completely unable to comprehend the villain's power. The enemy then reveals she used a tiny barrier spell right on the tip of her finger to brush it off. But as her defense starts to crack, she hears the kid say he used the exact same trick to strike back. Out of nowhere, some blue-haired guy crashes the scene, glaring at the boss with a razor-sharp look. Moving like lightning, the newcomer drops in from above and catches the beauty totally off guard. With a totally surgical strike, he uses a blade of pure energy to slice the vampire clean in half, getting instantly hyped. Carmilla actually cheers, thinking the fight is already over. Except the villain's head falls right into her own hands and she's standing there completely fine. Mocking them, she asks if they seriously thought a high elite would be taken out by one simple cut. Calling the woman an immortal freak, the newcomer realizes this fight is going to be a long one. Seeing her just completely ignore fatal damage because of her elite status sends the cat into a total panic. Realizing there's no other way out, our boy decides it's time to pull out his ultimate trick. He gives Carmilla a light pat on the shoulder to get the little mascot's attention. He casually tells her that the mission is all hers now, leaving the poor girl totally confused by his plan. He explains that he needs to charge up his finishing move and tells the feline to hold the line for a bit. Screaming in absolute panic, she swears there is zero chance she can hold off a threat like that. But suddenly, her true magical form appears, asking for just a little time and lending her full power. Still literally holding her own head, Libra gives the green light for her army to advance, and the blue-haired guy completely bails without looking back, leaving them to deal with the mess and seriously pissing off the cat. Our protagonist completely loses his patience, warning that if the coward runs off, he'll personally end the guy himself. This leaves the cat totally shocked by his ice-cold tone. This kid seriously does not mess around. She lets out a yell, straight up calling our boy the devil incarnate. Even so, she bites her lip and jumps right into the brawl while the hero preps his ritual. A wicked-looking blade materializes in the cat's hand, completely ready to slice up anyone who gets close. She grips the sword tight, hyper-focused on making sure she doesn't end up as a zombie snack. With her eyes glowing blood red, she lets out a battle cry and dives fearlessly right into the horde. She turns into an absolute hurricane, mowing down every single walking corpse that steps up to her. She dances through their attacks with insane speed, managing to perfectly dodge every single strike, pushing her focus to the absolute limit. The warrior keeps up the carnage with an iron will. Watching from the back, the kid figures that at this rate, she might actually clear the whole room herself. Just then, Lieber casually pops her head back onto her shoulders and says she smells a trap. She stares down the hero, accusing him of plotting something, but he fires back that she's no saint either. Wasting zero time, the villain holds up her golden scale, getting ready to cast a new spell. Meanwhile, Carmilla holds the line perfectly, slicing her way through another massive group of zombies, until the kid finally finishes his prep work and flashes a tactical hand sign. The enemy admits she hasn't quite figured out his little plan yet, but she raises her scale anyway. Giving him a heavy glare, she challenges the outsider to a little thing called the Final Judgment of Souls. Suddenly, a blue flame pops up in his hand, his literal soul essence catching him a bit by surprise. And right after, a dark flame appears in the villain's hand, representing her own twisted soul. Both flames are placed onto the plates of the golden scale for the ultimate verdict. The boss announces that the game has officially started, flashing a look of absolute, guaranteed victory. While our boy watches her with dead serious focus, not missing a single detail, she explains the rules. Whoever has the stronger soul and willpower gets to completely crush their rival. Hearing that this is all based on raw emotion, he just cracks a smile and boldly claims he's already won. Not understanding his crazy confidence, the villain is completely shocked when the scale instantly tips in his favor. It proves that our protagonist's soul is infinitely heavier, leaving the vampire completely floored. She screams that it's completely impossible, since she's lived for eras and should be on the level of the gods. Meanwhile, he just stands there with his usual deadpan expression, acting completely cold-blooded about the whole thing. Writhing in absolute agony, the immortal screams that not even death can stop her, but he just admits he only did this to buy time. This leaves the villain with a massive question mark over her head, totally clueless about his final checkmate. Right then, our hero activates a massive magic circle and shouts out his angel invocation. Two giant, glowing white wings instantly appear as he calls out the name Serial, slowly materializing a stunning blonde-haired angelic figure right in the middle of the hall. Standing right behind our hero is a six-winged angel in a beautiful dress, shining brighter than the sun. Floating there with a glowing halo and a totally peaceful gaze, she readies herself for the chaos. With an ice-cold glare, our hero stares down the vampire, totally ready for you to drop a like for the next part. Thanks so much for watching, and I'm out.